My name is Joanna, and I am 32 years old. I still remember that moment at my husband's family BBQ when his sister Melissa smirked and said, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." As laughter erupted around me, I simply raised my hot dog in a mock toast and replied, "Challenge accepted." That night, I packed my bags, left my husband of 5 years, and completely vanished from their lives. 1 year later, I have built an entirely new life, while they have become irrelevant footnotes in my story. Before I share all the details, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power when others try to make you invisible. I grew up in a small town called Lakeville in Minnesota, where my parents provided a stable but somewhat emotionally distant home. They loved me, but they weren't particularly demonstrative, which perhaps explains my later tendency to seek approval from others. Despite this, or maybe because of it, I excelled academically. My grades and determination earned me a full scholarship to Northwestern University, where I majored in graphic design. College was transformative for me. For the first time, I felt seen for my talents and ideas. My professors praised my innovative designs, and I graduated with honors. This led to a position at Blue Stream Marketing in downtown Chicago, where I quickly established myself as one of their most reliable designers. Clients specifically requested my work, and my portfolio grew impressively diverse. During those early professional years, I shared an apartment with my college roommate Tara. She was studying psychology and could always see through my tendency to please others at my own expense. "Joanna," she would say, "you need to stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable." I would laugh it off, but deep down, I knew she was right. My dating history before David was a series of relationships where I gave too much and received too little in return. I dated a musician who used my apartment as free storage for his equipment, but never remembered my birthday. After him came a startup entrepreneur who expected me to design his marketing materials for free while he barely acknowledged my career accomplishments. Each relationship left me emptier, yet somehow still believing that if I just tried harder, I would finally be enough. Despite these personal struggles, my creative spirit never dimmed. I filled sketchbooks with designs for my dream studio. Joanna Walsh Design would have floor-to-ceiling windows plants everywhere and a dedicated space for community workshops. I even researched small business loans and quietly saved a portion of each paycheck toward this goal. Financial independence was important to me, even when I later married David. I maintained a separate savings account that he never knew about. Something in me always recognized the need for a safety net, though I pushed that awareness aside for years. My personality was a study in contrasts. Professionally, I was confident and assertive. In personal relationships, particularly with David and his family, I became increasingly invisible. Tara noticed this shift early on. "You used to fill a room with your energy," she told me during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "Now you sound like you're apologizing for existing." Before David, I had a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in Chicago's Wicker Park neighborhood. The walls were painted teal artwork from local artists hung everywhere, and my drafting table sat by the window overlooking the street. I reluctantly gave up this space when David and I married, though I kept a few boxes of my most treasured possessions in storage without telling him. Rusty came into my life after a particularly difficult breakup 2 years before I met David. This scruffy terrier mix from the shelter became my emotional anchor. When I cried, he would nudge his way under my arm. When I laughed, he would dance in circles. David merely tolerated Rusty, which should have been another warning sign I ignored. Looking back, I see how I gradually lost touch with college friends, former colleagues, and even some family members after marrying David. His world became all-consuming, and maintaining relationships outside that sphere required more energy than I seemed to have. The invitations eventually stopped coming, and my social circle shrank to primarily include David's friends and family, none of whom truly knew or valued me. I met David Hamilton at a gallery opening for one of my clients. I had designed the exhibition catalog, and the artist had invited me to the event as a thank you. David was there with business associates looking perfectly at ease in his tailored suit among Chicago's cultural elite. I was standing alone admiring a particularly striking installation when he approached. "The interplay of light and shadow is remarkable," he said, gesturing toward the artwork, almost as captivating as your reaction to it. His opening line was smooth practiced, but his smile seemed genuine. David stood tall at 6'2", with dark hair showing the first distinguished touches of gray at the temples, despite being only 34. His confidence was magnetic. When he spoke, he maintained unwavering eye contact, as if nothing could possibly be more important than our conversation. After talking for nearly an hour, he asked for my number. "I rarely meet someone who sees the world with such fresh eyes," he said. I was flattered, especially when he called the very next day to invite me to dinner. Our courtship was dizzying in its intensity. David sent flowers to my office, took me to Chicago's finest restaurants, and seemed genuinely interested in my work and opinions. We appeared to complement each other perfectly. His analytical investment banker mind balanced my creative perspective. His worldliness expanded my horizons. My artistic sensibility seemed to soften his corporate edges. 3 months into dating, David invited me to meet his family. They lived in Highland Park, one of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs, in a sprawling colonial-style home with manicured grounds. I remember feeling nervous as we drove through the imposing gates. "They will adore you," David assured me, squeezing my hand. "Just be yourself." In retrospect, that first dinner with the Hamiltons contained all the warning signs I would later ignore. Catherine, David's mother, greeted me with an air kiss and immediately commented on my interesting choice of dress. Robert, his father, barely looked up from his phone except to ask about my family's business losing interest when I explained my father was a high school math teacher. Melissa, David's sister, asked pointedly if my earrings were vintage or just old. Throughout the evening, they exchanged glances and inside jokes that excluded me. David either didn't notice or chose not to acknowledge their behavior. When I mentioned it on the drive home, he dismissed my concerns. "They're just protective of me. They'll warm up once they get to know you." Despite these early red flags, our relationship progressed rapidly. 8 months after we met, David proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Geneva. The ring was enormous, a family heirloom that had belonged to his grandmother. "You'll be a Hamilton now," he said, as if that were the greatest honor one could achieve. Our wedding was an elaborate affair, primarily orchestrated by Catherine and Melissa. My suggestions were politely acknowledged, then ignored. My parents, quiet and uncomfortable in such opulent surroundings, were seated at a table far from the main action. My college friends were scattered throughout the reception, rather than grouped together as I had requested. Even my choice of wedding dress was subtly criticized until I selected one that met Catherine's approval. The honeymoon in Bali showed the first clear signs of how our marriage would unfold. David spent hours each day on work calls, despite promising to disconnect. When I expressed disappointment, he bought me an expensive bracelet rather than adjusting his behavior. After returning, we moved into a brownstone in Lincoln Park that David's parents had purchased as a wedding gift. The house came fully furnished in a style that reflected Catherine's taste rather than mine. When I suggested redecorating our bedroom, David seemed puzzled. Why would we change anything Mom worked with the best interior designer in Chicago? My career began taking a back seat to David's social and professional obligations. I was expected to attend dinners with his colleagues, charity galas with his family, and weekend retreats with his college friends. Meanwhile, my own professional achievements went largely unacknowledged. When I won an industry award for a rebranding campaign, David forgot to attend the ceremony. I tried desperately to fit in with the Hamilton family. I studied wine to contribute to their dinner conversations. I learned golf to join their weekend activities. I volunteered for the same charities Catherine supported. Yet nothing I did ever seemed quite good enough. There was always some subtle criticism, some slight adjustment suggested some way in which I failed to meet their standards. Gradually, I felt myself disappearing. My colorful wardrobe was replaced with the neutral tones favored by the Hamilton women. My outspoken opinions became muted agreeableness. My creative energy diminished as I spent more time maintaining the image of the perfect Hamilton wife. Yet I convinced myself that this was simply the process of growing up and building a life with someone else. I was determined to make it work, even as I increasingly lost touch with the person I had once been. Understanding the Hamilton family dynamic is crucial to comprehending why a single cruel joke could ultimately end my marriage. Each family member played a specific role in the gradual erosion of my self-worth, creating the perfect environment for emotional manipulation. Catherine Hamilton. My mother-in-law was the unquestioned matriarch. At 62, she maintained the polished appearance of someone a decade younger, with perfectly styled silver blonde hair and an ever-present string of pearls. She had never worked outside the home, instead dedicating herself to maintaining the Hamilton social position through charity boards and community leadership. She approached these activities with the strategic precision of a military campaign. Her criticism of me was always delivered with a smile, making it difficult to defend against without appearing overly sensitive. "Darling," she would say, inspecting my attempt at her traditional Christmas pudding, "how creative of you to interpret the recipe so liberally." Or regarding my presentation at a charity luncheon, "You were so brave to speak so informally to Mrs. Winthrop. I could never be so casual with the chairwoman of the Arts Council." David's father, Robert, was physically present but emotionally absent in most family interactions. As CEO of Hamilton Financial Group, he had built his father's regional investment firm into a national powerhouse. Now in his mid-60s, he spent most family gatherings checking his phone or discussing business with David. He largely deferred to Catherine in personal matters, but held absolute authority in financial decisions. His method of control was through money. The brownstone where David and I lived, the country club memberships, even the car I drove were all gifts with invisible strings attached. Once, when I disagreed with Catherine about a fundraising approach, Robert casually mentioned how fortunate we were that our housing costs were covered, allowing David to focus on building his career without distractions. The message was clear: financial security depended on conformity. Melissa, David's younger sister by 2 years, was the most openly hostile. Divorced at 30 and living in a Hamilton-owned apartment, she worked nominally in the family business, but primarily seemed occupied with maintaining her social media presence and competing with me for family attention. She had her mother's talent for disguising cruelty as humor, but none of her subtlety. "Love that top, Joanna," she might say at a family dinner. "I gave all mine like that to Goodwill last season." Or, "How brave of you to do your own hair for the foundation gala," followed by a significant glance at her mother. She particularly enjoyed creating situations that highlighted my different background, like asking me about boarding schools or European vacation homes, knowing I had experienced neither. Thomas, David's older brother, initially seemed like a potential ally. He and his wife Charlotte lived in Boston with their twin daughters. During their infrequent visits to Chicago, he was friendly and engaged with me in ways the others weren't. He asked about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Yet when conflicts arose, he invariably sided with his parents and sister, offering only private, sympathetic glances rather than actual support. Family traditions systematically excluded me while maintaining the appearance of inclusion. The annual Hamilton Christmas photo would always require multiple retakes because I was positioned awkwardly. Family recipes were shared with detailed instructions that still somehow omitted crucial steps. Vacation planning included asking for my input, which was then ignored in favor of returning to the same exclusive resorts they had always visited. The weekly Sunday dinners at the Hamilton family home became dreaded ordeals. These formal affairs required perfect attendance unless one had a truly exceptional excuse, which my work deadlines never qualified as. Each dinner followed the same pattern pre-dinner drinks, where the men discussed business and politics, while the women critiqued acquaintances and planned social events. The meal itself, where Catherine directed conversation. And post-dinner coffee, where family history and inside jokes reinforced my outsider status. During any conflicts that arose, David invariably chose his family over me. When Catherine rearranged our furniture while we were on vacation and I expressed frustration, David couldn't understand why I was upset. "Mom just wants our home to look its best." When Melissa made pointed comments about my modest family background at a dinner party, David later told me I had misinterpreted her teasing. His standard response became a refrain: "That is just how they are, Joanna. You need to stop being so sensitive." This gaslighting gradually made me question my own perceptions and reactions. Was I truly overreacting to Melissa's barbed comments? Was I being ungrateful for Catherine's helpful interference in our lives? Was I failing to appreciate the Hamilton family legacy that David felt so privileged to be part of? The annual family vacation to Martha's Vineyard crystallized my outsider status. The Hamiltons had been visiting their summer home there for 3 generations, and the week was steeped in traditions that predated me. There were inside jokes I would never understand, restaurants where the Hamiltons were treated like royalty, and activities planned with no input from the newest family member. When I suggested one small deviation from the schedule, Catherine looked genuinely confused. "But we always have lobster at Harborside on Wednesday nights. We have had the same table reservation for 25 years. Over time, I found myself becoming increasingly isolated. My friendships had atrophied as I tried to fit into the Hamilton world. My parents, sensing the dynamic but not wanting to interfere, called less frequently. Even my relationship with David had transformed from an equal partnership to me orbiting his family's son, desperate for warmth and acknowledgement that never came. By our 5th anniversary, the vibrant, creative woman who had once confidently navigated Chicago's design scene had been replaced by someone who carefully monitored her word stress and opinions to avoid giving offense. I had become a ghost in my own life present, but barely seen speaking, but rarely heard existing, but never quite belonging. The stage was perfectly set for the moment when a single cruel joke would finally force me to confront the truth I had been avoiding for years. The annual 4th of July family BBQ at the Hamiltons' lakeside property in Lake Forest was supposedly the most casual event on their social calendar. Catherine even referred to it as their relaxed family gathering, though it bore little resemblance to any relaxed gathering I had ever attended before meeting the Hamiltons. The event featured catered food, arranged to look homemade staff, discreetly managing everything from the perfectly arranged lawn games to the precisely timed fireworks display, and a dress code Catherine described as casual, elegant summer attire. That morning, I woke early, filled with the familiar anxiety these family gatherings always provoked. David was still asleep, having returned late from a business dinner the night before. I took Rusty for a walk, trying to center myself for the day ahead. The summer air was already thick with humidity, promising a hot July day. As we walked, I mentally reviewed my preparations for the barbecue. I had spent the previous day preparing my contribution to the event. Though Catherine always assured me I didn't need to bring anything, she invariably noted when I arrived empty-handed. This year, I had prepared my grandmother's famous potato salad and a homemade apple pie. I knew Catherine would ultimately delegate my dishes to the far end of the buffet table, but still I felt compelled to try. David finally woke as I was packing the food into containers. He grabbed a coffee and leaned against the counter, scrolling through emails on his phone. "Remember, Dad wants to discuss that potential position for me on the board," he mentioned without looking up. "Try to give us some time to talk privately." I nodded, already feeling invisible hours before we even arrived at the event. I had learned not to remind David that we had planned to discuss starting a family this weekend. His career would always take precedence. We arrived at the Hamilton estate at precisely 1 o'clock. The sprawling property overlooked Lake Michigan with manicured gardens leading down to a private beach. Staff members were arranging chairs on the expansive lawn, while caterers set up serving stations disguised as rustic food tables. American flags were tastefully displayed throughout the grounds, and red, white, and blue flower arrangements decorated every surface. Catherine greeted us at the entrance to the back patio, immaculate in a navy linen dress and white cardigan, not a hair out of place despite the growing humidity. "Joanna, darling," she said, air-kissing near my cheek, "how lovely you look. That dress is so comfortable-looking." Her gaze lingered momentarily on my sundress, which I had thought perfectly appropriate until that second. I handed her the potato salad and pie, which she promptly passed to a waiting staff member with instructions to find a place for these somewhere. David had already wandered off to find his father, leaving me to navigate the social minefield alone. Throughout the afternoon, I made numerous attempts to engage with various family members and their friends. Each time I encountered the same pattern, polite initial acknowledgement, followed by subtle exclusion from the conversation. I would approach a group, including Thomas and his wife, join their circle, and within minutes they would shift to discussing people I didn't know or events that preceded my entrance into the family. I overheard Melissa speaking to a cousin as I passed the drink station. David could have done so much better, she was saying, her voice just loud enough to ensure I would hear. She tries so hard, but she just doesn't fit, you know. They both glanced my way and then quickly looked away, suppressed laughter hanging in the air between them. By late afternoon, I had retreated to a quiet corner of the patio, Rusty loyal at my feet. I watched as David engaged enthusiastically with his father and some business associates, gesturing animatedly, completely in his element. He had not sought me out once since our arrival. Catherine had arranged an elaborate buffet dinner to be served at 6 o'clock. The catering staff had transformed the patio into an outdoor dining area with linen-covered tables and centerpieces featuring miniature American flags amid red and blue flowers. As guests began filling their plates, I noticed my potato salad had indeed been placed at the far end of the table, while Catherine was receiving compliments for her famous coleslaw recipe, one I knew had been prepared by the caterers. I filled my plate with small portions and found a seat at a table with Thomas, Charlotte, and some family friends I had met at previous gatherings. David eventually joined us, sitting beside me, but immediately engaging Thomas in conversation about a recent business acquisition. The conversation flowed around me, as it always did, touching on topics where my contribution wasn't needed or wanted: the exclusive private schools their children attended, the recent renovation of the country club, the charity gala, where Catherine was being honored as chairperson. Then Melissa joined our table, wine glass in hand, already showing signs of having had several drinks. She had been watching me throughout the day, and I could sense she had been building toward something. She sat directly across from me and waited for a lull in conversation. "So, Joanna," she said, her voice carrying that false sweetness I had come to dread, "how is that little design job of yours going? Still making cute little logos for coffee shops?" I forced a smile, acutely aware of all eyes at the table turning toward me. "Actually, my firm just landed the rebranding contract for Midwest Health Systems. It's our biggest client yet." "How nice," Melissa replied dismissively. "It must be fulfilling to have those little creative hobbies." She turned to the table at large. "Joanna is so quiet in the family, isn't she? Just sort of fades into the background." David chuckled uncomfortably, but said nothing to defend me. Thomas and Charlotte exchanged glances, but remained silent. Emboldened by the lack of opposition, Melissa continued, raising her glass in a mock toast. "You know what I was thinking today? If you disappeared tomorrow, Joanna, no one would even notice. You'd just be gone and life would continue exactly as it always has." The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter, some genuine, some clearly forced. David, to my horror, let out a short laugh before attempting to compose his face into a more appropriate expression. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I looked around the table at these people who had been my family for 5 years. I saw the truth in their eyes, in their awkward smiles, in their failure to contradict Melissa's cruel assessment. They really wouldn't notice if I disappeared. Or perhaps more accurately, they would notice only in the way one notices the absence of a mild irritation. I felt an extraordinary calm settle over me, the kind that comes with absolute clarity. I slowly raised my hot dog in a responding toast and looked directly into Melissa's eyes. "Challenge accepted," I said quietly. The table fell silent for a moment before Catherine called for attention to announce the fireworks would be starting soon. The moment passed, conversation resumed, and everyone acted as if nothing significant had happened. But inside me, everything had changed. I had finally heard what they had been telling me for years. For the remainder of the evening, I observed the family with new eyes. I noticed how they naturally formed a closed circle that excluded me. I saw how David unconsciously leaned away from me when addressing his family. I recognized the subtle eye rolls when I spoke. All the things I had been trained to ignore or explain away suddenly became glaringly obvious. The drive home was quiet. David, slightly drunk from the multiple bourbon cocktails his father had pressed on him, rambled about the board position and his father's praise of his recent work performance. He didn't notice my silence until we were nearly home. "You're unusually quiet," he remarked, as if just remembering I was in the car. "Did you not enjoy yourself today?" "Your sister made an interesting observation," I replied carefully. "Oh," David yawned. "What was that?" "She said if I disappeared, no one would notice." David rolled his eyes. Melissa was just joking, Joanna. You know how she gets after a few drinks. Don't be so sensitive. And there it was, the final confirmation. I nodded and looked out the window at the passing streetlights, each one illuminating my path forward more clearly than the last. I didn't sleep that night. As David snored peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying 5 years of slights, dismissals, and emotional neglect. Around 3 in the morning, I quietly got out of bed and went to sit in our rarely used home office. There, in the dim light of a desk lamp, I began to plan. When David woke at 7, I had already been up for hours making coffee and preparing his favorite breakfast, as if it were any normal morning. He came into the kitchen looking slightly hungover, but refreshed after his night's sleep. I placed a mug of coffee in front of him and sat down. "About yesterday," I began carefully. "I wanted to talk about what Melissa said." David sighed, stirring his coffee. "Are you still upset about that?" "It was just a joke, Joanna. You know Melissa doesn't have a filter." "It didn't feel like a joke," I said, keeping my voice even. "And what bothered me most was that everyone laughed, including you." "I was just being polite," he defended, though we both knew that wasn't true. "You're making too big a deal out of this. That's just how families tease each other." "My family never teased each other by suggesting someone's existence was meaningless," I countered. David's expression hardened slightly. "Well, not all families can be as sophisticated as yours, with your father teaching high school math and your mother working at the library." The contempt in his voice when describing my parents' respectable careers was unmistakable. In that moment, I realized there was nothing left to salvage. David would never see how his family had systematically diminished me because he shared their view. To him, I was an accessory, a box checked on his life achievement list: successful career, appropriate wife, prestigious address. "You're right," I said, standing up. "I should get ready for work." David seemed pleased that the conversation was over, never suspecting it was the last meaningful exchange we would ever have. At my office, I closed my door and made a series of calls. First to Tara in Seattle, who listened without interruption as I explained what had happened and what I planned to do. "My guest room is yours for as long as you need it," she said without hesitation. "And Rusty is welcome, too." Next, I called my bank and arranged to transfer my personal savings to a new account at a different bank. Over the years, I had managed to save nearly $40,000 in an account David knew nothing about. It wasn't a fortune, but it would be enough to start over. I called a trusted colleague who had recently started her own design firm and secured a promise of freelance work that I could do remotely. Then I contacted a shipping company to arrange for my few precious possessions in storage to be sent to Tara's address in Seattle. During my lunch break, I visited a lawyer who specialized in family law. I explained that I wasn't ready to file for divorce yet, but wanted to understand my options. The consultation gave me the information I needed to make informed decisions in the coming months. By the time I left work that evening, my escape plan was in motion. I stopped at an electronics store and purchased a new phone with a new number. I withdrew cash from an ATM to cover immediate expenses. Then I drove home for the last time. David had texted earlier to say he would be working late. This was fortunate as it gave me the freedom to pack without explanations. I moved methodically through the house, taking only what truly mattered: my personal documents, irreplaceable family photographs, a few cherished books, enough clothing to fit in a single suitcase, and Rusty's essentials. Standing in our bedroom, I removed my wedding and engagement rings, feeling the indentation on my finger where they had rested for 5 years. I placed them on my pillow with a brief note that echoed Melissa's words: "Let's see if anyone notices I'm gone." I took one final walk through the house that had never felt like home. The furniture selected by Catherine, the artwork chosen to impress David's colleagues, the kitchen, where I had tried and failed to recreate family recipes to Hamilton standards. None of it had ever belonged to me, and I felt nothing leaving it behind. With Rusty in his carrier and my suitcase in the trunk, I drove to O'Hare Airport, where I had arranged for long-term parking. From there, we took a taxi to a hotel near the airport, paid in cash, and checked in under my maiden name. In the anonymous hotel room, I turned off my old phone after sending a brief email to my boss explaining a family emergency would keep me away for a few weeks. I used my new phone to purchase plane tickets to Seattle for the following morning. That night, as Rusty curled against me in the unfamiliar bed, I experienced an unexpected feeling relief. The weight of constantly trying to be someone I wasn't, of seeking approval that would never come, had been lifted. In its place was a hollow space, painful but full of possibility. The next morning, as our plane took off from Chicago, I watched the city recede below us. Somewhere down there, David would be waking up to an empty house, reading my note, perhaps calling my phone, which would go straight to voicemail. Soon his family would be informed, theories would be exchanged, and the narrative would be constructed. I imagined Catherine's tight-lipped disapproval, Robert's businesslike approach to the problem, Melissa's barely concealed satisfaction. And through it all, David's confusion at this disruption to his carefully ordered life. But for the first time in years, their reactions were no longer my concern. As the plane banked west toward Seattle and my new life, I felt the first tentative flutter of something I had almost forgotten: freedom. Tara met us at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport with a warm hug and tears in her eyes. "Welcome to your new beginning," she said, taking my suitcase as Rusty wriggled excitedly in his carrier. Her apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood became my sanctuary. The guest room was small but bright, with a window overlooking a courtyard garden. Tara had prepared it with thoughtful touches, fresh flowers, new towels, and a dog bed for Rusty. Those first days were a blur of emotional extremes. I would wake feeling exhilarated by my newfound freedom, then crash into waves of grief for the life and relationship I had lost. Tara, with her psychology background, gave me space to process, but never let me sink too deep. "What you're experiencing is normal," she assured me during one particularly difficult evening when I questioned my decision. "You're grieving not just your marriage, but the person you became within it." Meanwhile, my old phone, which I kept charged but silenced in a drawer, filled with increasingly frantic messages from David. They evolved from confused, "Where are you? Call me back immediately," to angry, "This is incredibly immature and irresponsible," to manipulative, "Your mother called me worried sick about you. How could you do this to her?" After a week, Catherine and Robert joined the barrage with their own messages, each revealing their true feelings more clearly than they ever had during our 5 years of family dinners. Catherine's voicemail was particularly telling. "Joanna, this behavior is precisely why David's father and I had reservations about your suitability. A woman of proper breeding would address problems directly rather than creating a spectacle." Tara and I listened to these messages together, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, but always confirming that I had made the right choice. The Hamiltons, in their attempts to bring me back into the fold, were only proving how toxic that environment had been. By the end of the second week, I had secured a temporary position at a local design studio through an industry connection who knew my work. The owner, Natalie, was intrigued by my portfolio and unconcerned about my vague explanation for my sudden relocation. "Creative people often need to reinvent themselves," she said simply. "We have a 3-month project that could use your expertise." I decided not to pursue divorce immediately. This was partly strategic, keeping my location private while I established my new life, and partly emotional, giving myself time to heal before facing legal proceedings. I consulted with a Seattle attorney who specialized in complex divorce situations and developed a long-term plan. With a steady income and Tara's support, I began creating new routines. Each morning, Rusty and I explored a different part of Seattle. I discovered small coffee shops where I could work for hours, undisturbed bookstores, with reading nooks perfect for losing myself in stories of other people's lives, and parks where Rusty could run freely while I sketched the city's distinctive landscape. Therapy became an essential part of my rebuilding process. My therapist, Dr. Winters, specialized in helping people recover from emotional abuse and rebuild their sense of self. "What you experienced was a systematic dismantling of your identity," she explained during one session. "The Hamiltons, including David, created an environment where your worth was defined solely by your utility to their family narrative. Through these sessions, I began to recognize patterns in my own behavior that had made me vulnerable to such treatment. My lifelong tendency to seek approval, my willingness to compromise my own needs, my belief that love meant self-sacrifice, were all issues I needed to address to avoid repeating the same patterns. 3 months after my disappearance, the attempts to contact me had dwindled significantly. David's daily messages became weekly, then monthly. A mutual friend reported that he had told people I had mental health issues and had left for treatment. This narrative painting me as unstable, rather than him as neglectful, was exactly what I had expected from the Hamiltons. With my first freelance checks, I treated myself to a complete makeover. I cut my long brown hair into a stylish bob and added subtle highlights. I rebuilt my wardrobe piece by piece, selecting clothes that expressed my personality rather than conforming to Catherine's approved aesthetic. Each choice, from a vibrant blue blazer to handcrafted silver earrings from a local artist, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. 6 months into my new life, I found my own apartment in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood, a quirky area known for its artistic community. The space was small, but filled with character-exposed brick walls, large windows, and enough room for a proper design workspace. The day I signed the lease, I felt a surge of pride. This place was entirely mine, chosen by me, paid for with money I had earned. My professional life flourished in unexpected ways. The temporary position with Natalie evolved into regular freelance work. My distinctive style and reliability attracted other clients. I started a professional Instagram account showcasing my design process, carefully curated to reveal my work without disclosing my location. Reconnecting with my parents was another important step. When I finally called them after settling in Seattle, their relief was palpable. "We knew something wasn't right," my mother said, "but we didn't want to interfere." They had always sensed my unhappiness with the Hamiltons, but respected my independence too much to say so. Now freed from the constraints of holiday schedules dictated by Catherine, we began planning their visit to Seattle. 8 months after leaving Chicago, I received a text from a former colleague. "David's dating someone new," it read along with a photo from a charity event. The woman beside him was startlingly familiar with long brown hair and a conservative dress very similar to ones I had worn during my Hamilton years. I felt an unexpected emotion pity. David hadn't learned anything from my departure. He had simply replaced me with a new version of what his family expected. By the 9-month mark, my design business had grown enough to require a formal structure. I registered New Horizon Design Studio, a name that reflected both my fresh start and my forward-looking perspective. I rented a small commercial space in a converted warehouse that housed several creative businesses. Having colleagues again, even if we simply shared a building rather than an employer, helped rebuild my professional network. At the 10-month anniversary of my disappearance, I allowed myself to look back at photographs from my life with David. I was struck by the woman in those images, her smile never quite reaching her eyes, her posture slightly hunched, as if trying to take up less space. In my most recent photos taken by Tara during a weekend hiking trip to Mount Rainier, I stood tall, laughing openly, my face turned confidently toward the camera. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Through it all, Rusty remained my constant companion. The terrier who had once been barely tolerated in the Hamilton brownstone now enjoyed pride of place in my apartment with his own window perch and regular playdates at the local dog park. His unconditional love had been a lifeline during my darkest moments, and watching him thrive in our new environment reinforced that I had made the right decision for both of us. 11 months into my new life, I received an unexpected email from Thomas's wife, Charlotte. "No one talks about you anymore," she wrote. "It's as if you never existed. Melissa has a new target, David's new girlfriend. Same pattern, different person. I sometimes wonder if you were the lucky one getting out when you did." Her words confirmed what I had come to understand in the Hamilton family. I had been not a person, but a role. When I left, another woman simply stepped into the space I had vacated. The cycle would continue because the family dynamic remained unchanged. As the 1-year mark approached, I felt ready to take the final step. I contacted my attorney and formally filed for divorce using a legal address that couldn't be traced back to my actual residence. The papers were served to David at his office, a public setting where he would be forced to maintain his composure. His response came through my attorney anger demands for explanation threats about financial consequences. But ultimately, with no children and a prenuptial agreement that protected his family's assets, there was little to negotiate. The divorce would proceed, and the last formal tie to my old life would be severed. The day the divorce was finalized, Tara organized a small celebration with the close friends I had made in Seattle. As we raised glasses in a local wine bar, I realized I was surrounded by people who genuinely saw and valued me. My neighbor Joan, who had welcomed me with homemade bread. My client Michael, who trusted my creative vision without micromanaging. Fellow designer Pablo, who had become both collaborator and friend. These connections weren't based on social standing or family name. They had formed naturally through shared interests and mutual respect. In a single year, I had built something the 5 years with the Hamiltons had never given me, a community where I truly belonged. As I sit here in my studio 1 year after leaving Chicago, I can trace the arc of my journey with clarity I never possessed while living it. The pain of those years with the Hamiltons hasn't disappeared, but it has transformed into something valuable: wisdom, resilience, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. The healing process wasn't linear. Even now, certain triggers can momentarily transport me back to that feeling of invisibility, a particular tone of dismissal in someone's voice, the sound of crystal glasses clinking during a toast, the sight of women in pearl necklaces clustered at charity events. But these moments no longer hold power over me. They are echoes rather than fresh wounds. My design studio has flourished beyond my most optimistic projections. Last month, I won a competitive bid to rebrand a prominent Seattle tech company, beating out established agencies. The client specifically cited my fresh perspective and authentic approach as the deciding factor. Words that would have been meaningless in the Hamilton lexicon are now the foundation of my professional success. I've developed a signature style that incorporates elements of storytelling into visual design, perhaps influenced by my own experience of rewriting my narrative. Clients seek me out for this distinctive approach, and I recently hired my first assistant to help manage the growing workload. My apartment has become a true reflection of myself. Colorful, abstract paintings from local artists' furniture, chosen for comfort rather than status photographs, documenting my explorations of the Pacific Northwest. Nothing here would meet Catherine Hamilton's standards, and that is precisely why it feels like home. I've made peace with my parents who visited Seattle 3 months ago. Watching my father play with Rusty in the park and seeing my mother's delight in exploring Pike Place Market with me healed something deep within our relationship. Free from the shadow of the Hamiltons' judgment, we connected as adults with mutual respect and genuine affection. Last week, I received a text from Charlotte, who has become an unexpected source of information about my former life. "David's engaged to Jessica," she wrote. 6 months of dating. The ring is his grandmother's. Catherine is thrilled. The identical timeline, the same family heirloom, the same maternal approval. Reading those words, I felt nothing but compassion for this woman, unknowingly stepping into the role I had abandoned. Melissa's cruel joke has become ironically prophetic, but not in the way she intended. I did disappear, and they did stop noticing my absence. But rather than proving my insignificance, this only revealed the superficiality of their attachment to me. They didn't miss me because they had never truly seen me in the first place. The final divorce papers arrived yesterday. As I signed them, officially returning to my maiden name, I realized something profound. I had not just left a man or a family, I had reclaimed myself. The woman who raised that hot dog in defiant toast a year ago had found her voice, her value, and her vision for the future. Tara came over to mark the occasion, bringing champagne and takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. As we sat on my balcony watching the sunset over Elliott Bay, she asked if I had any regrets. "Not about leaving," I answered honestly. "My only regret is that I didn't do it sooner." My parents called later that evening, having received the news that the divorce was finalized. "We're so proud of you," my mother said, her voice warm with emotion. "Not just for starting over, but for becoming more fully yourself in the process." This morning I woke to an email from a young designer asking to interview me for her blog about women entrepreneurs. "Your story of building a successful studio from scratch is so inspiring," she wrote. "I'd love to learn how you found the courage to start your own business." If only she knew the full story, I thought with a smile. Perhaps someday I'll share it. For now, I'm focused on the future. Next month, I'm expanding my studio to a larger space. I've been invited to speak at a design conference in Vancouver. I've started dating again cautiously but optimistically, a kind architect who respects my independence and makes Rusty's tail wag enthusiastically. The challenge Melissa unwittingly set for me that July afternoon has been more than accepted. It has been transformed. In disappearing from their world, I appeared fully in my own. In being forgotten by them, I remembered myself. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that sometimes walking away isn't an act of defeat, but the ultimate form of self-respect. Sometimes the most powerful response to being told you don't matter is to go somewhere you do. So if you're watching this and feeling invisible in your own life, know that you have options. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is raise your metaphorical hot dog and accept the challenge of rewriting your own story. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship or situation that diminished you? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more journeys of self-discovery and resilience. Remember, disappearing from the wrong life is often the first step to appearing in the right one. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the courage to challenge those who underestimate your worth.